Alright, here we are with the 2020 Indian Roadmaster, and I'm getting ready for a pretty long trip, so we're going to do a safety inspection here. I typically do this really after every long ride, and I say after the ride because I do this as part of like the washing ritual, right? Putting your hands on pieces of the bike and making sure that everything looks good, is running the way that it should. So we're going to go over that a little bit. I'm going to talk about some of the stuff that I check, why, how, all of that, and hopefully clean this thing because she is dirty from riding. We'll start top to bottom, front to back. We'll do a wash, and we'll be checking out all of the mechanical junk along the way. I tend to start with the tires, and so a lot of this is going to be pretty superficial. This bike only has 1,100 miles on it at the moment. 1,100 miles I just got on it through the weekend, so it's been a slow start. But we're going to do this anyway because it's proper procedure and good practice. So even though we're pretty confident we don't need it, we're going to do all this. So we check the tires, and as you can see, the tread looks real nice, right? We'll do a full roll to make sure that there's no, nicks, cuts in the rubber. Make sure that we're not getting anything like nails or something like that that might screw up our day. Rotors look nice. Brake pads, and again, if there was considerable mileage on these, I would pull them and check, make sure that they got proper depth to the pads. But 1,100 miles on these, I think we're pretty good. And then other things that will take some time to just double check is that all the hoses look clear and in good shape. Nothing is frayed or out of place. And dirty's okay, we'll be touching all of this stuff as we start washing her down, but just like to touch it all and make sure it looks good in the beginning. So pull these side covers off also. And make sure saddlebag wiring looks good. Seat connections are nice and tight. So here, I lost the kickstand switch, the side stand switch some time ago, so I spliced that connection. I have a replacement, I just haven't put it back on yet. But we want to make sure that everything's in good shape with that I don't have any errors or issues with the ECM as we're starting this long ride. Haven't had since I spliced that together. There are a lot of different things you want to think about when you're about to go on a long ride. You don't have a lot of the luxuries when you're riding a motorcycle that a car might have. For example, you're down about 2 tires. You only have 2 tires. And so a flat really becomes a lot more of a concern than in a car, right? So some of the things we look at when we're talking about a safety inspection on a motorcycle are like the tires and wheels. You got to make sure there's good tread, make sure that the rubber's in good working order. You don't want to have cupping or bald tires. You don't want to have any nicks or cuts in the rubber if you can avoid it. and you really want to make sure that there's no debris, no like rocks that are embedded in the rubber, no nails that you've picked up, anything like that that might cause a problem along the way. If you've got spoked wheels, I mean, it's not too common anymore, but so you used to have to make sure that your spokes are tight on the wheels. Most of the time these days they're solid steel or something, aluminum, mags, whatever, and so you don't necessarily have to do too much worrying about your wheels, but you want to make sure still that the wheels are in good shape, and again, no nicks, no dings, nothing that's going to cause any kind of damage to the rubber, to the tires, to the part that's keeping you on the road. And also the brakes. So again, this thing has 1,100 miles on it, so the brakes are great. But you want to make sure that you're working that rear brake pedal, working the front brake lever, and that your brakes aren't squeaking, that they're feeling like they're firm, right? They've got a good grip, that they bring you to a stop, and you aren't taking an abnormal amount of time to complete a stop. Some of the other stuff that I like to look at is the controls, all the controls for the motorcycle. So again, make sure that the levers are working, make sure that all your switches and whatnot are working and responsive. I talked earlier when I started the bath process about checking the hoses, making sure that your hoses are in good order, and same thing with the cables. If we here come around to right, so making sure like your brake cable, clutch cable, everything is in good order, not frayed, all of that stuff. So these are all really, really important parts of the safety inspection. Another part that we'll get into, and this probably won't be until my pre-trip ride when I'm actually getting ready to hit the road, but checking to make sure that the lights are working. I typically will do this when I'm going on any type of a sizable ride, just a quick walk around and make sure that all of your lights are in good working order, that there's no, nothing is obstructing the lenses, that you don't have any bulbs or lenses that are broken or anything like that. Used to, again, back in the old days, I've been riding for a long time, but you used to also want to check your reflectors. Most of the time, I've taken a lot of those off. I prefer lights instead of reflectors these days. So, if you have reflectors, you want to make sure that those are clean. There's also oil and fluids. So I actually just did the first oil change on this bike at 500 miles, and so we've got about 600 miles on this bit of oil, and there's a while until I'm going to have to worry about changing it. I'll probably change it after this ride that I have coming up. You also want to do some inspection of the chassis. You want to make sure, like, if there's chipping or lifting paint on the chassis, that could be indicative of a crack, and that could be really dangerous. Again, this isn't like a car where you have a lot more stability. A crack in the frame of a motorcycle could be catastrophic. So you want to look for places where the paint might be lifting, any problems at all with the frame itself. Checking over the suspension and making sure that your front forks, that the seals are right, that there's no oil leaking from the forks, making sure that in the rear your shocks or swing arm are working really well and there aren't any issues. And then also with the chain or belt driven vehicle, you want to be sure that your chain or belt is tightened and lubricated if necessary, that the tension's proper. And then of course, if you have one of those shaft drive bikes, my old bike's a shaft drive bike, and making sure that the splines are lubed and all of that. Now, this is one thing I actually prefer shaft driven bike to a chain or belt driven, is that I've really only ever had to lube the splines on my drive shaft once through the life of the bike. And my current bike has about 50,000 miles on it, and still I've only had to lube them once. But with a chain or belt driven bike, you tend to have to adjust and replace and lubricate and all of that stuff. So definitely an important piece to keep in mind. Now, I also like to do just a general overpass of every fastener that I can touch. It's rare anymore that these things will vibrate so bad that the major fasteners come loose, but I always like to just double check, take a wrench and just make sure that before I hit the road, before I get moving on a long one, that all of those major fasteners are tight and in good shape. And then lastly, making sure your kickstand's working, just making sure that the bike runs nice. If I'm going on a long ride, I tend to do this piece over a couple of different rides, right? I'll just make sure that I go for a shorter ride. We're going to ride for dinner tonight. And just make sure that things are feeling right and looking right. Give her a rub down and a good feel afterwards to just be sure. We're going on a long ride, and riding with a group is one thing when you've got some support, but riding by yourself is a whole other game, because you don't know who's going to be around if you run into trouble, what kind of trouble you might run into. And so things like this are just really good preemptive precaution to make sure that you can enjoy the ride and not have to worry about the negative things on the road. We're inside after finishing washing and completing a safety inspection on the 2020 Roadmaster. 1,125 miles here after riding for dinner, and so we've really covered everything to make sure that all the systems are working so that I can enjoy this coming trip. So I really appreciate you all for taking the time to watch this video. It's one of my first for this new channel, and trying to kind of get a feel for the content that we'll be putting out. So I'd love to hear your comments, things that you like about this video or don't, and what you'd like to see. So hopefully I'll be making more here in the coming weeks.